The city of Terminus was a creature of balance, forever living on the knife's edge between fire and ice. It was humanity's precarious foothold in the twilight ring of the planet Kaelus, a world tidally locked to its parent star. To the east, a perpetual dawn blazed against the wall of fire. To the west, a creeping, frozen dusk fell away into the wall of ice. And in the middle, in the endless twilight, the city lived. Private Detective Kael Vance was a man of the dusk. His office, a cramped room above a steaming noodle stall, looked out over the rain-slicked, neon-drenched streets of the western Duskfall district. He had once been a rising star in Ethel Corp's own security forces, over in the pristine, sun-kissed Daybreak district. But his inconvenient habit of finding truths the corporation wanted buried had earned him a one-way transfer to this shadowy side of the world. Now, he dealt in the city's small sins, cheating spouses, stolen data chips, and the quiet desperation of people living in the shadows. He was closing one such case, looking at grainy footage of a husband who had lied about his gambling debts, when the call came. It wasn't a desperate spouse from down the street. It was a crisp, official summons from Central Command. A high-profile death. On the Daybreak side, the journey from Duskfall to Daybreak was like traveling between two different worlds. The grime and chaos gave way to gleaming white spires and serene, sun-drenched plazas. Kael felt the oppressive perfection of the place settle on him like a shroud. He reached the penthouse of the Elysian Spire. The victim was Dr. Eris Thorne, the planet's lead climatologist, a man whose face was on the public news feeds every week, assuring the citizens of their world's perfect, eternal stability. He was found in his personal observatory, dead from a single, high-velocity projectile wound to the head. Ethel Corp's private security, led by the cold, efficient Commander Rostova, had already secured. The case is open and shut, Detective. A tragedy. Dr. Thorne was under immense professional stress. He took his own life. Your presence is merely a low-district formality to satisfy the public charter. Sign the report and be on your way. Kael ignored her and walked the scene. It was clean. Too clean. The official report on his datapad said Thorne had shot himself. But Kael's cynical, practiced eye caught the inconsistencies the corporate guards had missed, or had been ordered to ignore. The lack of any significant powder burns on Thorne's temple. The victim's personal data slate, which should have held a note, had been professionally wiped clean. And one other thing. On a nearby table, a single, ancient, physical book had been pulled from a shelf and left open. It was a collection of pre-Exodus poetry. Its title, Songs of Sunset. Sunsets. A man who has lived his entire life in a city where the sun never moves. He knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, that this was no suicide. This was a murder, staged and sanitized. He looked at Commander Rostova, whose calm, gray eyes betrayed nothing. I'll need a copy of all of Dr. Thorne's recent research files and his personal logs. Back in his own dark, rainy corner of the world, Kael's investigation began. It was an unsanctioned, professional rebellion. Every official channel was a dead end. Thorne's files were sealed. His colleagues were unavailable for comment. His own department chief had warned him to drop it, that poking Ethel Corp was a form of career suicide. But Kael was a man who picked at scabs. He started with the only clue he had, the book. Why was a climatologist obsessed with sunsets? He dug into Thorne's public history. He quickly discovered the official story of his career was a lie. Thorne wasn't just under stress. He had been publicly discredited and fired from his position on the Planetary Regulation Committee a month ago. His crime, promoting alarmist, unsubstantiated theories regarding the long-term stability of the planet's tidal lock. He had become a heretic. Kael knew he needed to find Thorne's daughter, a university student named Lyra. But she had vanished, her university records sealed, her apartment empty. She was in hiding. His digging did not go unnoticed. On his third day of the investigation, he returned to his office to find it had been expertly tossed. Not a violent ransacking, but a clean, professional search. They hadn't taken anything. They had just left a message: "We are watching you." That night, he was sitting in a dimly lit Duskfall bar, trying to find an information broker who could locate Lyra Thorne, when an encrypted, anonymous message appeared on his datapad. The message was a single, untraceable address and a time. A meeting. It was a risk. It could be a trap. But it was the only lead he had. He went to the address. It was a dark, rain-slicked alley in the deepest, most forgotten part of the industrial sector. A figure emerged from the shadows. It was the young woman, Lyra, her face pale with fear. Lyra, her voice a nervous whisper, "You're the detective." The unchipped. I had to see if I could trust you. Kael, your father didn't kill himself. No. He didn't. They killed him. Ethel Corporation. Because of what he found. Kael, what did he find, Lyra? Lyra, the truth. He kept saying it over and over. The lock is breaking. The great miracle is a dying machine. She looked at him, her eyes pleading. He hid his research. All of it. He said if anything happened to him, the answer was in the last sunset. I don't know what it means. It's from one of his poems. The poetry book. It was the key. He knew now that he wasn't just solving a murder. He was on the trail of a secret so vast and so terrible that a corporation would kill to protect it. He gave Lyra the key to a small, secure bolt hole he kept. Stay here. Don't talk to anyone. I'll find the truth. As he stepped out of the alley, his mind racing, he saw them. Two men in plain, gray, corporate suits, standing at the far end of the street, watching him. They didn't move. They didn't have to. The message was clear. The hunt was now official. Detective Kael Vance had a witness, a clue, and a target on his back. He had secured Lyra Thorne in a small, anonymous bolt hole in the labyrinthine depths of the Duskfall district, a place not even his own department knew existed. Now, he had to decipher her father's final, cryptic message: the answer is in the last sunset. He sat under the single, bare light bulb of the safe house, the ancient poetry book, Songs of Sunset, opened before him. It was a collection of pre-Exodus poems, romantic elegies to a daily phenomenon the people of Terminus had never experienced. It seemed like a dead end. But Eris Thorne was a man of science, of data. His clue would be precise. Kael's cynical detective's mind, a mind that looked for patterns in human chaos, began to treat the book not as literature, but as a cipher. He cross-referenced the book's publication date with the station's historical archives. He analyzed the page numbers, the number of stanzas, looking for a code. Nothing. Frustrated, he ran his finger down the final poem in the book, the one titled, At Day's End. And he saw it. A tiny, almost imperceptible anomaly. A single letter in the final line of the poem was printed in a slightly different, cleaner font than the rest of the archaic text. A digital insertion. A single character in a sea of words. He scanned the page with his datapad. The single, anomalous letter was part of a hidden hyperlink, a key to a locked file hidden in the city's deep archives, a file that could only be accessed from a terminal that was not connected to Ethel Corp's network. The file was Thorne's last message, his real suicide note, waiting for someone to find it. But accessing it would mean going to the one place in the city that still used truly independent servers, the university archives. A place in the heart of the Daybreak district, the heart of the enemy's territory. His journey back to the gleaming, sun-drenched side of the city was a descent into a new level of paranoia. The number of gray-suited Ethel Corp auditors on the streets had tripled. They were not just watching him, they were actively sweeping the Duskfall district, their movements coordinated and precise. They were hunting for Lyra. Kael, using the chameleon-like skills he had learned in his years in the shadows, managed to slip through their closing net. He used crowded transport tubes, service tunnels, even the perilous, high-altitude maintenance gantries that connected the spires of the city, to make his way to the university. He found the independent terminal in a dusty, forgotten corner of the library, a place even the students had forgotten. He plugged in his datapad and accessed the hyperlink. The file opened. It was Thorne's final, unredacted research log. A video file. If you are seeing this, then I am dead, and Ethel Corp has succeeded in burying the truth. But the truth cannot be buried. It is a matter of physics. The great miracle, the device at the core of our world that holds us in this perfect, stable twilight, it is not a miracle. It is a machine. An alien machine. And after 2 centuries of continuous operation, it is failing. The screen filled with horrifying data, seismic readings from the planet's core showing a rhythmic, stuttering decay in the device's energy output. A simulation showing the planet's rotation, held in place by a massive artificial magnetic field, beginning to slip, degree by agonizing degree. The rotation has already begun. It is slow, imperceptible for now. But it is accelerating. I presented this data to the Ethel board. They called me a fearmonger. They knew that to admit the truth would be to admit that our entire civilization is built on a foundation of borrowed time. It would cause a panic they could not control. So they chose to silence me. They chose to let us all burn, just to maintain their order for a few more days. The final image on the screen was a clock. A countdown. My final calculation shows the device's magnetic lock will suffer a catastrophic failure in 48 hours from the time of this recording. The planet will begin to rotate freely. The city of Terminus, our entire world, will begin its slow, final journey into the sun. The last sunset is not a poem. It is a deadline. The log ends. Kael stared at the screen, the blood draining from his face. The murder of Eris Thorne was no longer a simple corporate conspiracy. It was an act of mass negligent homicide. The entire city, 1 billion souls, was on a ticking clock, and the only people who knew were a dead man, a terrified girl in hiding, and him. He now had the proof. But as he downloaded the file, a silent alarm he did not know he had tripped went off in a security office 3 floors above. He had the truth. But Ethel Corp now knew he had it. He was no longer just a nuisance to be watched. He was now a direct and immediate threat to their control, a loose end that had to be cut, permanently. He made his way out of the university, the data slate containing the end of the world feeling like a lead weight in his pocket. As he stepped out into the bright, perpetual daylight of the plaza, he saw them. Commander Rostova, flanked by a dozen of her heavily armed, black-clad enforcers. They were not here to intimidate him. They were here to end him. Kael Vance. You are in possession of classified corporate property. Surrender the data slate, and your termination will be quick. There was no escape. The plaza was an open kill zone. He was outmanned, outgunned. The truth was about to die with him. But as the enforcers raised their weapons, a new sound cut through the air. A sound of chaos. An explosion from the far side of the plaza. A transport vehicle, sabotaged and set on a collision course, had just slammed into a corporate spire. It was a diversion. A brilliant, chaotic, and suicidal diversion. From the chaos, a small, nimble figure emerged, firing a stun pistol at the enforcers, giving Kael the cover he needed. It was Lyra Thorne. She had left the safety of the bolt hole, had followed him, had used her own knowledge of the city to create the only chance he had. Kael didn't hesitate. He ran, disappearing into the panicked crowds as Lyra fought a desperate, losing battle behind him. He had escaped, but the price was a brave young woman sacrificing herself for a future she would now never see. Kael Vance ran. He didn't look back. The sound of the explosion, of Lyra Thorne's desperate, sacrificial diversion, was a gunshot marking the start of the final race. He clutched the data slate containing the end of the world, her final, precious gift to him, and disappeared into the panicked crowds. The weight of her sacrifice settled on him, a burden heavier than any truth. He was no longer just a cynical detective solving a case. He was the executor of a dead woman's last will and testament, a will that left the future of an entire city in his hands. He had the proof. He had the deadline, less than 47 hours before the planet's rotation began its final, irreversible acceleration. But he was one man, now the most wanted fugitive in Terminus, hunted by the full, ruthless might of Ethel Corporation. Commander Rostova would not be fooled twice. She would lock down the city, her enforcers on every corner. His only hope was to get the truth out. To bypass the corporate-controlled news feeds and speak directly to the people. He had to reach the city's emergency broadcast system, a system that could override every screen in every district. And that system was located in the one place he was least welcome, the top floor of the Ethel Corp spire, the gleaming, white heart of his enemy's territory. Kael became a ghost of the Duskfall, using his intimate knowledge of the city's forgotten underbelly to move unseen. He navigated the old, decommissioned service conduits, the high-altitude maintenance gantries that connected the city's spires like a spider's web, the roaring, fiery heat vents from the industrial sector. He was a rat in the walls of the gleaming corporate palace. He made it inside the Ethel Tower's foundations, but the climb was a vertical war. The tower was on its highest alert, every corridor patrolled by Rostova's black-clad enforcers, every elevator locked down, every stairwell guarded. He fought his way upward, floor by bloody floor, a silent, grim battle in the service shafts and maintenance tunnels. He used his wits, his knowledge of the building's schematics, and the brutal, close-quarters fighting style he had learned in the alleys of Duskfall. He was no soldier, but he was a survivor. He finally reached the top floors, the pristine, silent executive levels. He was battered, bruised, and running on fumes, but he was almost there. He crawled out of a ventilation shaft into the quiet, opulent lobby of the broadcast wing. And she was there, waiting for him, as he knew she would be. Commander Rostova stood alone in the center of the room, her plasma pistol held steady in her hand. "You have been a remarkable nuisance, detective. You should have stayed in the shadows of Duskfall where you belong. Your lie was too big, Commander. It was bound to cast a shadow of its own. That lie, as you call it, has maintained a century of peace and prosperity. You are about to trade that for a chaotic, screaming death. You will not get to that broadcast console." The final confrontation was not a firefight. It was a brutal, desperate, one-on-one battle for the future of their world. Rostova was a trained soldier, her movements precise and deadly. Kael was a brawler, fueled by grief and a desperate, righteous anger. They crashed through the expensive furniture, their fight a messy, violent intrusion into the sterile corporate world. He was outmatched in skill, but not in will. He managed to disarm her, and in a final, desperate move, he tackled her, sending them both crashing through the armored glass wall of the broadcast studio itself. He staggered to his feet, bruised and bleeding, and slammed the data slate into the main console. He didn't have time to make a speech. He didn't have the words. But Eris Thorne did. He activated the emergency broadcast and played the doctor's final, unredacted log for the entire city to see. "People of Terminus. You have been lied to. The planet is not stable. The lock is breaking. Look to the east. Look to your sun. A sunset is coming. You must evacuate. Now." The message, backed by Thorne's undeniable data, washed over the city. A wave of disbelief, then dawning terror, then citywide, absolute panic. But it was a panic with a purpose. A desperate, unified scramble for the spaceport, for the private shuttles, for any vessel that could fly. A massive, chaotic exodus began. Kael, his job done, slipped away in the confusion, making his way to the spaceport. He managed to get aboard one of the last, crowded evacuation shuttles, just another anonymous, battered face in a sea of frightened humanity. As the shuttle ascended, pulling away from the city, he looked out the viewport. The evacuation was in full flight, 1,000 tiny ships rising to the stars. And below them, on the eastern horizon, the impossible was happening. The brilliant, searing, and eternal sun was beginning to dip, ever so slightly, below the edge of their world. The last sunset of Terminus had begun. It was the most beautiful and most terrifying sight imaginable, the sky painted in colors of fire and blood that no one on their world had ever seen. Kael watched as the city he had both hated and saved was slowly, gracefully, consumed by the dawn. He had saved the people. But their home, their entire world, was gone forever, a memory that would now haunt their uncertain journey into the stars. He had solved the murder. He had exposed the truth. And now, he was just another refugee, a ghost leaving a glass house, watching it finally, truly, burn. Log of Kael Vance. Day 34 of the Exodus. The relief of our survival has worn thin, replaced by the grim reality of our new existence. We are a nation of 1 billion souls, packed into a ghost fleet of 10,000 ships, a ragtag flotilla of luxury yachts, lumbering cargo haulers, and flimsy shuttles, all held together by hope and jury-rigged power conduits. We are a city without a planet, a people without a home, forever chasing a new dawn that seems to recede with every light year we cross. The title they have given me is Fleet Coordinator, but I am a detective, not a leader. I solved a murder and in doing so, became the unwilling shepherd of its survivors. My job is no longer to find the truth, but to hold on to the fragile lie that we will all make it to the nearest safe harbor, the Haven system, before our ships, and our hope, fall apart. That it is a lie that gets harder to tell every day. Kael sat at the head of the Provisional Fleet Council, a makeshift government convened on the bridge of the largest cargo hauler, now rechristened the New Hope. The news from the chief engineer was grim. The numbers don't lie, Kael. The civilian ships, the ones that weren't designed for deep space, their air scrubbers and water reclaimers are failing at an exponential rate. At our current speed, a third of the fleet will have critical life support failure before we reach the Haven system. We don't have enough time. A tense silence filled the bridge. Before them on the holographic star map were two options. A long, safe route through charted space that would take a month, and a short, dangerous route through a volatile, asteroid-dense nebula that could cut their journey time in half. We must implement fleet-wide austerity. Strict, brutal rationing of air, water, and power. The weaker ships will fail. It is a regrettable but necessary sacrifice to ensure the survival of the majority. We did not survive the end of our world just to start sacrificing our own people. We all get there, or none of us do. He pointed to the nebula on the map. We take the shortcut. That's a massive risk. The nebula is unstable. We could lose dozens of the smaller ships to asteroid collisions or radiation. It's a better risk than a slow, certain death by suffocation. We go together. That is my decision. Deep in the brig of the New Hope, former Commander Rostova watched the Council's decision being broadcast to the fleet. She was a prisoner, her face a mask of cold, calculating calm. A guard, one of her former, loyal enforcers, delivered her meal. The people are scared, Commander. They are saying the detective is leading them into a death trap. They are starting to miss the order of the old way. Patience, Sergeant. Chaos is a ladder. And Mr. Vance is about to kick it out from under himself. Let the people feel the fear. When they are desperate enough, they will remember who kept them safe. Her loyalists moved through the fleet, quiet whispers in the dark corridors of the crowded ships. They stoked the fires of dissent, turning the Council's desperate gamble into a story of reckless leadership. They reminded the people of the perfect, safe, orderly world they had lost, and promised that only the strong, disciplined leadership of the old Ethel Corp could see them through. As the Exodus fleet approached the swirling, beautiful, and treacherous mouth of the nebula, the new order that Kael had fought to build began to crumble. The comm channels were flooded with angry, fearful messages. The announcement of the dangerous shortcut had been the spark. Rostova's loyalists had fanned it into a flame. Hold the course. We knew this would be hard. They're scared. They'll hold together. Kael, maybe we should reconsider. The descent is more organized than we thought. But it was too late. On the main view screen, they saw it. A group of 50 ships, led by 3 of the large, corporate-class cruisers, broke formation. They veered away from the nebula, positioning themselves between the fleet and its destination. A new, fleet-wide broadcast, overriding Kael's command channel, erupted across the system. It was the face of the lead mutineer, one of Rostova's former lieutenants. People of Terminus. The Council has chosen a path of reckless gambling, a path that will lead us to our destruction in this nebula. We will not follow a cynical detective from the gutter into a graveyard. We, the former officers of Ethel Corp, represent order, discipline, and a viable plan for survival. He continued, his words a powerful poison of fear and false hope. We hereby declare a vote of no confidence in the Provisional Council. We demand the immediate release and reinstatement of Commander Rostova. She will lead us. She will take us on the longer, safer path. We will survive, but only the strong among us, as is the logical way. Join us, and live. Follow the detective, and die in the storm. Kael stood on the bridge, watching as another dozen ships began to break away and join the mutineers. He was faced with an impossible choice. He could let them go, splitting the fleet and condemning them to a slow, certain death by attrition. Or he could use the few loyal security vessels he had to fire on his own people, to force unity through an act of war. The sunset was behind them. But a new, more terrible storm, one of his own making, was about to break. Kael Vance stood on the bridge of the New Hope, a detective once again facing a standoff. But this was not a grimy alley in Duskfall. This was the cold, hard vacuum of space. And the culprits were not criminals, they were his own people, a fleet of frightened souls pointing their metaphorical guns at their own heads. The mutiny was a clean, sharp fracture, splitting the last of humanity into 2 desperate tribes. Their fleet is smaller, but they have the corporate cruisers. The ones with the better weapons. If this turns into a fight, Kael. It won't turn into a fight. He looked at the mutineers' flagship on the view screen. Their leader was a man he knew, a former Ethel Corp officer. But he was just a mouthpiece. The true power, the true mind behind this rebellion, was still locked in his own brig. They're not the enemy, Kael said, his voice a low growl. Their fear is the enemy. And I need to talk to the woman who is selling it to them. His plan was a desperate, illogical gamble that made his new council stare at him in disbelief. He would not fight. He would not negotiate with the mutineers. He would go straight to the source. He ordered Commander Rostova released from the brig and brought to the bridge of the mutineers' flagship. And he demanded a single, fleet-wide, open-channel debate. A parley for the future. The 2 leaders faced each other as holographic projections, their images broadcast to every ship in the fleet. Commander Rostova, back in her crisp, black uniform, looked powerful, calm, and utterly in control. Kael, in his worn jacket, looked like the tired, cynical detective he was. You see the chaos you have created, detective. This is what comes from your philosophy of hope. Division. Mutiny. Fear. I offer this fleet the only thing that can save it, order. A return to the logical, disciplined leadership that kept our world safe for 200 years. We will take the long, safe route. Yes, it will be hard. Yes, some of the weaker ships will be lost. That is regrettable, but it is logical. It is survival through strength. Her words were a siren song to the frightened people listening. A promise of certainty in an uncertain universe. But Kael did not argue with her logic. He argued with her soul. I remember the order you're talking about, Commander. I lived in its shadows. It was the order that let a man like Eris Thorne be murdered to protect a corporate lie. It was the order that sent you to kill me in a university library. He looked past her, into the holographic camera, speaking to every person in the fleet. And it was the bravery of one young woman, Lyra Thorne, who believed in something more than just survival, that gave us all the chance to be here today. She sacrificed herself so that we could have a future. All of us. He leaned forward, his eyes boring into Rostova's. You offer survival for the strong. You offer a future for the few who are logical enough to deserve it. Lyra Thorne died for a future for everyone. That is the choice before this fleet. Do we return to the cold, hard calculus that doomed our last world? Or do we honor her sacrifice and find a new way to live, together? A tense, profound silence filled the calm channels. Kael had not offered them a better plan. He had offered them a better reason. He then played his final, impossible card. But you're right about one thing, Commander. Your tactical skill is the best in this fleet. My plan to cross the nebula is a risk. I cannot guarantee its success alone. He took a breath. So I'm asking for your help. Let us. Let all of us. Your tactical genius, my talent for chaos. Together. Help me bring every last one of these ships through that storm. And when we reach the Haven system, the people can choose what kind of society they want to build. One of your order, or one of my hope. It was an offer Rostova had not expected. Not surrender. An invitation. A promotion. A path back to the power she craved, but on his terms. She looked at Kael's determined face. She saw the thousands of ships in her mutiny, their crews now looking at her, waiting for her answer. Her ambition warred with her dogma. And ambition won. An uneasy, almost unbelievable truce was formed. The fleet, now reunited, turned its nose towards the swirling, treacherous clouds of the nebula. And for the next 3 days, they flew through hell, guided by a strange, new partnership. Rostova, from her command ship, was the brilliant, cold tactician, plotting the safest course, her commands shifting the fleet in a graceful, disciplined ballet. Kael, from the New Hope, was the improviser, the master of chaos, using his gut to navigate the unpredictable asteroid fields and radiation flares that the models couldn't predict. They lost ships. The journey was hard, and it was costly. But they lost far fewer than they would have on the long, slow journey. They emerged from the other side of the nebula, battered, scarred, but whole. And before them, glowing in the distance, was the Haven system. The final scene takes place on the bridge of the New Hope. Rostova stands beside Kael, looking out at the new star that is their destination. The war between them is over, for now. A new, more difficult challenge, building a new society, lies ahead. He opened his final log, his voice no longer that of a reluctant leader, but of a man who had finally found his purpose. He had not just saved a city. He had saved a people. The last sunset on Terminus had forced them all into a long, terrible night. But together, they had finally, against all odds, sailed towards a new dawn.